working for the Chavez government.
On the Democrats' obstruction, but the Democrats are really pretty predictable here. They'll block whoever far-left groups like People for the American Way and Nan Aaron's Alliance for Justice want them to block. And, I don't know if it works this way on other issues, but that just happens to be an issue where they've pretty much ceded the power to tell them who to block to the groups on the left. And if you doubt me, just look at the Democratic Judiciary Committee memos that were leaked in so-called Memogate in '04, or just recently look at the nasty letters that People for the American Way and Alliance for Justice has sent to the Judiciary Committee. I think that's one of the big reasons Leahy has felt so compelled to bypass Matthews, Conrad, and Keisler, that he had to break his own rules and get a tongue lashing from the ABA just to do it. And, for a Democrat to get a tongue lashing from the ABA isn't easy. So I think in the end, the key is the GOP senators. The Democrats will do what they want to do, but will the GOP senators fight hard enough, make them pay a high enough price, raise the visibility high enough that they'll back down? And it's largely going to come down to whether the Republican leader, McConnell, has the will to hold bills hostage. He did that for a judge's deal a few weeks ago. Leahy has managed to gut the deal, but the next deal, if there is one, will have to include Matthews, Conrad, and Keisler, and we'll see if McConnell has the stomach for it, and I think I'll stop there.
Kurt, my first question is for you. In McCain's speech, he talked about how he thought it was the obligation of senators to vote for qualified nominees no matter who the nominating president is, and he cited his votes for Justices Breyer and Ginsburg, I believe. What should be the expectation of conservatives in a Democratic administration of senators who share their values? That is a jurist committed to upending the Constitution through his or her interpretation qualified, and should we expect that the Senate gives a rubber stamp of approval? I'm not saying deny them a vote, but did McCain make a mistake in promoting his votes for two justices who authored or supported some terrible decisions in recent years?
Well, let me first point out that there were only, for both Breyer and Ginsburg confirmed, I think there were like 3 votes against them. So the Republicans never engaged in this, and no one could have been more, ideologically tinged than Ginsburg. I mean, if you look at some of the things she did when she was general counsel of the ACLU, they're pretty outrageous, but the Republicans didn't even bring them up. I think our position has always been not that the Senate has an obligation to confirm any judge, but just they have an obligation to, assuming there's no ethical problems or they're not grossly unqualified, they have an obligation to get them out of committee on the floor with no recommendation or a negative recommendation if they want, and give them an up or down vote. And I would think even Obama's nominees, no matter how liberal, deserve an up or down vote. And maybe, my organization will make the case for why they should be voted down, but they shouldn't be obstructed.
Well, do you think the number of votes should increase from 3 to maybe 40 next time around with similar nominees are put forward by a liberal president?
Well, I don't know if they should or not. I think the more interesting question is, will they? Have the Republicans had enough that they will now play use the same tactics the Democrats have used? My guess is no. I think it's just a difference between, I think the Democrats and again, a lot of this is orchestrated by the groups on the left, really look at this as good versus evil. And so there is nothing they do that they think is overboard. And I just don't think Republicans look at it the same way.
Jim, what's the situation for John McCain? He's in a legal tangle with the FEC over the primary funding and whether or not he could pull out. The DNC has filed a complaint against him there. And then there's the issue he may not be able to get general funding. What does a candidate do in such circumstances, and how do you think it's going to play out, assuming that there's no deal made to fully commission the FEC, so to speak?
Well, that's a difficult question. Every politician, I think, in every campaign needs to have options, and they need to, even if the McCain campaign thinks that general election funding is what would be the preferable option, I think they must have a plan B. And of course, that plan could involve who is the vice presidential nominee. A good argument could be made for Senator McCain right now to select Mitt Romney and say that and turn him loose to fundraise for the next 5 months, even before we get to the convention. And I think that would serve to both transition the McCain campaign from where they were when they got became the presumptive nominee to the convention, but it would also provide a realistic chance of the campaign raising sufficient funds. And that is not only because of Romney's own personal wealth, but also because of his noted fundraising ability. So, there are options, but I do hope they have them. I think that this is the most outrageous manipulation of our elections that I think we've ever had. That is to gut a federal agency just so you can prevent that federal agency from doing its job under the law, and that is to certify eligible people for public funding. But it is perfectly obvious that the Democrats are not above that.
Cliff, Barack Obama, we put him on our list of 10 most corrupt politicians, and people were surprised initially, and I guess they're not as surprised now given some of the revelations recently about Tony Rezko and others. Do you think the media is more amenable now to investigating his background, or do you think there's any traction there that's to be had? It was ABC who first started talking about Jeremiah Wright, but that necessarily isn't a corruption issue. That's just more of an ideological description of some of his allies, or in terms of an issue for him in the campaign. But in terms of his personal ethics, his dealings with Rezko, the recent news that he sought a state grant for an employer of his while he was there in the state Senate. He's getting paid while in the state Senate, and he's seeking money for his employer while in office. They pop up here and again, the Chicago Tribune or the Los Angeles Times, but they're not gaining traction. Do you think that's going to change, or your work at Accuracy Media, is it going to have any salutary effect?
Well, this may sound Clinton-esque, but depends on how you define the word corruption. I think corruption can encompass ideological dimensions. When you associate with terrorists and with communists, not to mention these business crooks and all these other financial shenanigans, to me that's potential corruption. I'll tell you one issue we've been looking at AIM, and it involves the media. The Chicago Tribune has been terrible, in my opinion, in covering their home state senator. Perhaps you know that Obama's campaign strategist, David Axelrod, worked for the Tribune for 8 years. And the paper has published over the years many puff pieces, not only about Obama, but about the communist terrorist friends of his, Bill Ayers and Bernadine Dorn. A couple weeks ago now, the Tribune published a story about Ayers consisting of questions and answers, where they were trying to fill in the blanks, tell the readers the real story about Bill Ayers. And they said in the course of that story that except for 3 members of the Weather Underground communist terrorist group who blew themselves up when a bomb exploded in their bomb factory, the Weather Underground terrorists had never killed anybody. Well, we found out that there's a case out in San Francisco back in 1970, I think it was February 14th, where there was a bombing of a police station that killed a police officer, a sergeant, and injured 7 or 8 others. It was a massive blast, a lot of shrapnel. The police officer who died was in the hospital for a couple years. And there's actually testimony from an informer in the Weather Underground, a fellow named Larry Grathwall, who wrote a book about his experiences in the organization, gave official congressional testimony, that Bill Ayers himself had told him that Bernadine Dorn had carried out that bombing.